Welcome to the Puppet Tools in CC 2019. If you want to follow along with me, please open the project file puppettools-cc2019.aap. I have provided you here with several images, they are all PNGs, for us to do the puppeteering. But first of all, let's arrange our workspace. Please go to the animation workspace. Maybe you don't have it over here. You can click on the double arrows and you will see here animation and you can select it. Now the animation usually comes messed up, so let's arrange it a bit. Let's close the effects and preset, we don't need it. We have the wiggler, the smoother, and the audio. Let's close the audio. Here you are. So actually we need only the smoother. Then let's arrange our workspace a bit to make it even better. I will take the composition, click on it and drag the whole thing to the right. This is where you start seeing a long green line from top to bottom. So the comp will be here and that will be feasible to start animating our characters. Having set up our workspace, I would like you to take a look at the PNGs. If you double click on the tiger, for example, you will notice that the image, if you turn on transparency, has a transparent background. This is the kind of images or PNG images that will animate inside the puppet pin. You need the puppet itself and you don't need the background. If you take the alien also, it doesn't have any background. Let's close the footage and let's take tiger and create a new composition. My default composition time is 5 seconds here for the images or the stills. If it's not 5 seconds for you, please right click and go to composition settings and make sure it is a 5 second here by typing 500. Now the composition has a certain background that's green. This is for visibility, but if you put the transparency on, you will notice also that the image doesn't have any background. Now the puppet pin will work on the alpha channel. If you remember the channels in colors, for example, you click on the 3 colors here. These are the red colors within the image. The dark black means it has a lot of red, and the gray scales, there is less red. If you go to the alpha channel, that's the interesting one, it will represent the pixels that do have certain color. It could be red, green, blue, or a mixture of these colors. Actually, it should present here the non-transparent pixels. And when you select any of the pin tools, it will act on the alpha channel. It will create a kind of mesh, and this is exactly what you are going to distort, the alpha channel. Cool, let's go back to RGB. And then in the next lecture, we start working on using the pin tools on our character over here. In the previous lecture, guys, we set up our workspace and we created a composition. Now let's explore a bit the puppet pins. What I will do is to take you through the pins, how to work with the pins and the concept and so on. Then later on, we will go through the workflow, meaning what pins you would start with, then how to add other pins for the animation. We have here several kinds of pins. You have now the puppet position pin, and you have the starch, the bend, and the advance, and the overlap. The position, the bend, and the advance are animation pins, meaning you can animate with these pins. The starch is to stiffen certain areas, and the overlap is to organize which part of the image comes in front and which parts come in the back. Let's go to the concept first. Let's start with the position pin. I will select it and go towards the image. I will select the layer itself or the effect, and you can point anywhere inside your image, inside the alpha channel if you remember, and you can set a pin by just clicking. Okay, I will set one just over here. Notice what happened. A position pin has been created and a mesh also has been created. And here you have the mesh option. You can hide the mesh or show the mesh. Okay, for now we show the mesh. It has its expansion and the density. I will go through these later on. And you have here the record option that will appear only when you're using the position. Now, if you come to the pin, you can click on it and start moving it. Okay, as simple as this. Now, notice what is moving. It is not your image altogether. It's only the mesh or the alpha channel that is being moved and somehow maybe distort a bit. Okay guys, so you can start animating like this without moving the layer itself. I will undo this. Now let's add another pin and see what happens. I will add the pin here at the end of the tail. So now you have two position pin. If you select the previous one and you start moving it around, notice what's happening. The previous pin is acting as an anchor for this pin. Notice how it's working. I will undo that. Now, if I select the other pin and start moving around, you notice that the previous pin is acting as an anchor. It is not moving. So you can move one pin at a time if this is the only pin selected, of course. And notice how there is distortion on the tail. Within the concept of pins acting as anchors for the other pins, let's add a few more. Let's add one on the legs here. And now, if I move the tail, you will notice now the legs are not moving. All the other pins are acting as anchors. Here you are. Let's add more pins to fix certain points, and then we move the tail and see exactly how it will behave. Just put one over here and one over here. Okay, that will be cool. And maybe one on the neck over here. Here the legs are moving, but when he moves his tail, maybe we shouldn't have the knees moving. So I'll put another pin here and maybe another one here. It doesn't matter, I can delete them later. Let's take the tail now and notice what's happening. Only the tail is being moved with whatever is affected when you move the tail within the mesh. So you notice here it's affected. You can put a position pin. I will undo, put a position pin here. Okay, so now this one will act as an anchor point. And now you have the tail, and of course you have more distortions from the other side. I will undo this and undo the last pin. Now you could also take another pin and notice here you have the distortion. The distortion is always according to the mesh. Let's see now what happened in the timeline. First of all, the puppet pin is an effect, as you have noticed maybe. And here you have the puppet effect. You have also the puppet engine. Now, since CC 2018, the puppet engine has moved from legacy to advanced. And then you have an adjustment here, mesh rotation refinement, and you can work on transparency. And a new option here, auto trace shapes. We will see that later. And you have the mesh. So the mesh has been created. And then you have the density of the mesh just over here. And then you have the expansion of the mesh is 3.0. And you have under the form all the pins that you have added. Now, if you twirl down one of the pins, in CC 2019, you have the ability to change what kind of pin you have positioned. Very useful. So you have the option to change it to a starch pin, bend, or advance. But actually, this is a position pin, hence it's going to animate the position of the pin. And notice in the timeline here, you have already keyframed all the pin. So now when you add a position pin and an advanced pin, there will be a keyframe that is created automatically. If I select the layer and press U, you can see all the keyframes have been created each time you added a pin. So I hope your time indicator was not on the end. So we'll put it in the beginning and you start working. Then of course you can move all the keyframes later on. So now that we have previewed the concept and only the position pin, in the next lecture, we'll see a bit more about the bend pin and how it works. In the previous lecture, we went through the position pin and we understood that the position pin works only on the position, and actually it acts as a very stiff anchor. You will get to know why I'm saying stiff. It's a very strong anchor here when you move the other pins. Let's focus a bit on the bend pin. This is the one that we want to explore in this lecture. For this, I'm going to use a new image, the zebra. I'll create a new composition. Let's crop it. We come to crop over here and we just crop it just like this. That's cool. And then we come to composition, we say crop comp to region of interest. Then with the selection tool, I will select the image and make it smaller. Let's go and check the alpha channel first of all. So you notice the alpha channel is the white one and the black is all transparent. Let's go back to RGB. And here I'm going to show you a small tip. Select the pin, any pin you like, and then click outside the alpha channel. And you notice in the timeline, the effect has been created, but it didn't create any mesh or any pin. The nice thing about it, if you point now back, you will see a very yellow contour where it tells you this is your alpha channel. Work within this contour. Also notice that though I have selected the bent pin, you can see it over here, it's showing me like a position pin. Don't worry about it, it will work as a bent pin. I'm gonna put a bent pin just on his head. And within the timeline, you notice something important. There is pin type, it's a bent pin. It has scale and rotation, and it has no position. So bending is about scaling and rotating. To do it visually here, you have the possibility to rotate. You see the rotation tool now, you can click and drag, so it's rotating all around this bent pin. And also you have the option to scale the empty square here. You click on it and drag, it will scale up or down the way you would like. Of course, you have one pin, so it's acting on the whole image. Our reset. If you have problem to resetting or undoing, you can come over and say reset here and maybe reset the rotation if you want to. Before we add a position pin, let's add a bent pin and see the effect. I will add a bent pin on the neck, just over here. Of course, this one can rotate and bend. So let's go back to the first one and try to rotate it a bit. Notice that the rotation is actually pretty smooth, and the second bent pin is not acting as a very stiff anchor. Actually, it's a smooth anchor. I will undo this, Ctrl Z, and then I'm gonna work on the scale here. Notice that scaling very nicely and very smoothly. Now, why am I saying that? Well, let's go back to the second pin we have put here, the bent pin, and now let's put a position pin and let's see the difference. Now, if you come back to your bent pin and rotate, notice exactly what's going to happen. The whole concept of anchor has changed. So the bent pin can act as an anchor, but a very smooth anchor. And actually, the deformation using the bent pin are much better. Here you are. So this one is just rotating the whole thing, and the position pin is really acting as a full anchor for the whole image. I will undo this. So this is the concept of the bent pin. Mind you, if you come to pin type here, you can change it back to position. Now the scale and rotation disappeared. If you go back to bend, of course, you go back to the initial value, you lose what you have done as animation here. Let's add more bent pin around. For example, I will add one here, one on the leg, and one in the middle, and see just the effect. Might not be right. And let's see if you can bend the foot. Actually, it's bending pretty nice. Maybe we should stiffen this one so it's straight, and we can bend this one again. Let's compare this one with the position pin. Of course, I can't rotate. I will have to move. Put one over here, one in the middle, and notice the distortion now is like totally different. Even if I stiffen it, it's not gonna give me the right thing. So really, you have to come over, and for now, please just play with the position pin and the bent pin and notice how it's happening. Get familiar with them. This is the concept here that is really quite interesting between the bent pin and the position pin. In the next lecture, we are going to continue with another animation pin, which is the Puppet Advanced Pin. So I will come over here for now and delete the effect because I want to work on this one in the next lecture. Let's explore how the latest pin, the Puppet Advanced Pin, will work, and also its combination with the bent pin and the position pin. I will just click outside, then come over and click in the middle of his head. Then what I would like to do is to add another advanced pin just in the middle here, so I can see how it's working as an anchor. I will come over to the first pin, and of course, you know now you can use the center to move. Okay, you can use the rectangle here to scale up and down within the region, and then how to rotate. The second pin will act as an anchor for the first pin. They are both advanced. Let's see exactly how it works. If you rotate, you will notice that the second pin is acting like a pure anchor for this region. Nothing beyond this region over here has been deformed. So it's a quite powerful and intelligent anchor, by the way. So here I just want to rotate the head, and it's rotating only the head, and I don't have to put position and anchor all over the place. So actually it's working very fine. That will be very feasible if you are doing only this animation where you are animating only the head. Let's compare it with the other pin. I will delete this one and go back and put a position pin just over here. I will then the previous pin over here, the pin 1, I'm gonna put 0 for the rotation. I'm sure there is no deformation. So I'm gonna deform now. Now that's what's happening. With the position pin, the body is moving, or the other part of the image are moving. Previously, with the advanced pin being over here as an anchor, really nothing has moved. Quite convenient, right guys? But still, using the position has its own benefit. Let's remove this one. I will just delete it, and then I will reset this one to 0, so I have 0 transformations here, and then go back to the bent pin, and let's put one just over here. And now let's deform with the advanced pin. See exactly the effect. Here you are. The bent pin is working very nicely, is bending, right? And of course it's affecting the whole image. So it depends exactly what you are doing. This is not feasible in our case here, but actually it's pretty powerful using the bent pin with the advanced pin. But yet what's more powerful is using 2 advanced pin. Here you are. I'm gonna put another one over here, back, and then if I rotate, notice I have a very cool rotation and very feasible one to move it. It will act as a very intelligent anchor, much more intelligent than the position pin. And if you look at it now carefully, why would you use the position pin? Just if you want to animate the position and have a very stiff anchor. Otherwise, you will have smoother animations and deformations using the bent and the advanced pin alone. Okay guys, so it's up to you now to decide which pin is going to be used. But we have to admit that the advanced and the bent can do a great job. Now in the next lecture, I want to introduce you to the other pins. First of all, we start with the starch, and then we'll work with the overlap. Before we start working with the starch tool, I would like to show you something about the mesh, or explain to you about the mesh. There is here the alien pick. It's a nice one. It's a bad one, in fact. And I can use it, create a new composition to show you about the mesh. Let's make it a bit smaller. And let's go ahead and add an advanced pin tool. I will just add it just over here on the neck. Another one on the head here, just in the middle. Now you notice we always have seen this mesh being created. Well, it is through this mesh, these triangles that you see, that the deformation is made. This is a kind of algorithm. It's even used in civil engineering to deform surfaces or to predict how surfaces are going to be deformed. So if you select your pin, for example, and start moving around, you will notice you are actually deforming these triangles over here all over the place. And without the mesh, it will be almost impossible to be able to do any deformations or predict a certain deformation. Now the mesh has 2 properties, its expansion and its density. Let's focus on density. The density is about the density of the triangles within the mesh. You can take it down to 0, and now the density is minimum. I'm going to delete this pin so you can see exactly. So you have now the density at 0, it means at its minimum. Of course, it's not possible to have a single triangle. So it is at its minimum, and when you do certain deformations here, they are very coarse. You have very few triangles to deform. Increase it to a certain level. I will go back to 12, that's the maximum. You will have more triangles to deform, and then the deformation is a bit better or more logical if you like. Something important that you want to notice. Every time you add a pin, in fact, let me take the position pin, because that's the one that will really change things. If you click, you notice it added the pin, but in the same time, it has deformed the mesh. I will zoom in, and you notice the mesh has been deformed because to be able to work with the position pin, you need more triangles around here, more of the mesh to make a smoother or a more logical deformation. every time you add a pin, mainly the position pin, you will have a certain change within the mesh. That's a very important point that you want to always keep in mind when adding new pins. You have here added the mesh to allow a certain, deformation through the position. So actually it's through the mesh that you do the deformation. And more triangles you have within the mesh, more these deformations are refined, if you like to. There is also the expansion. And let me show you on the alpha channel here. You notice that you have the mesh that is a bit outside the alpha channel. Okay, we have already moved them. So when you deform here through this pin, for example, you will also taking in consideration whatever is outside. If you put the expansion at 0, now the mesh is exactly the same size as your alpha channel. And when you move, you're also taking everything with you. You notice, I'll put it back to normal. It will take all the triangles. Actually, it wasn't like this in After Effects, just to make problems, but now it's very good. Now, funny enough, you can put it at minus, and it has its work. So now, when it's -5, it left behind, of course, 5 pixels or something like this. So you notice the pixels have been left behind. I will add one here to show you. 5 pixels are outside the mesh, and hence they are not deformed. Very useful in certain animation and certain effects if you like to. Now let's take this hand and move it around. Okay, it moves according to the mesh. Now if you increase the mesh expansion, I will take it to 10. That's what's happening now. These areas are joined. So when you move over here, of course, it's going to affect the mesh over here, and everything is being distorted. I will undo this. And let's go, for example, to 15. Notice that as soon as I change the expansion, the triangle or the mesh adjusted, and you notice there have been a certain deformation. But now notice this area here. The mesh is in continuous form from the outside the hand up to over here on the feet and the torso. If you click and drag now, the mesh is moving all together. This is now one single piece. Of course, if you really exaggerate, here you are, like you have one single mesh now over here, and if you move one pin, the whole mesh is gonna move over here. So your decision of what kind of expansion you want to use will always depend on the image that you have, and if you're leaving some parts out, you want to extend it. If you want to join certain parts, like we have done here with the 10, then you want to expand it, for example. So actually the default or the best is 3. We can also work with 2 sometimes, and even 1, depending on how much you want to join within the mesh. Now that you have understood the job of the mesh, in the next lecture, I'm going to talk about the Starch tool and how it affects the mesh. Let's work a bit on the effect of the Starch tool. Let's take, for example, the Advanced Pin tool, and then put one in the middle of the head and one on its neck over here. Now, if you use the Advanced Pin tool on the head and you move it, notice what's happening to the neck. Something that you might not want to have within your animation. This neck is going totally flat. To stiffen the neck and give it a kind of bone, if you like, you will use the Starch tool. And we'll show the mesh. Now notice here the mesh at a density 12, it has a certain number of triangles here for deformation. If you put a Starch pin, the number of triangles increases a lot. Because it increases, then the effect of the deformation is minimized. Now notice, because the Starch pin is nearer to this pin over here, then it has more influence. Then the Starch pin has created many triangles here to influence this pin and not this one. The same will happen, for example, if I put it just over here, which we don't want, but you notice how they are trying to influence each other to minimize the distortion. So the Starch pin will minimize the distortion. Let's see exactly what happened. So now, if you move the neck no more goes flat. Instead, there are other distortions that are happening. You know, it's always there is a distortion somewhere. You cannot remove them at 100% and make them perfect the way you think. There is always a distortion. So actually, this is the job of the Starch Pin. In short, it can create a kind of a bone if you like. Now the Starch Pin starting 2019 is just a pin. You cannot expand it, you cannot do anything to it. But it's actually acting a bit more than a starch, and it has a small effect of an anchor point. Let's try over here. Let's open the mesh. And of course, if you put a pin here and you start animating this one, you will notice that the hand will go very awkward. Let's try. We'll go to the Advanced Pin tool, click over here. Right? Now I'm clicking in the middle because I want to animate the hand. Here you are now. Notice how the hand is like very distorted. I will undo this. Go to the Starch Pin tool. Let's add one over here, thinking this is the hand, and one over here. So these are the gloves, for example, just like this. So notice the influence now of the Starch Pin is mainly around this area and this area. Yet it's gonna work very nicely. Notice now the hand is being, kept almost straight or intact, like if there is a bone, is not being deformed at 100%. What comes first? The Starch Pin or the Advanced Pin or the Bend Pin or the Position Pin? Well, it's an argument if you like. If you delete all these pins, let's reset the whole effect. And come over and take a Starch Pin. If you click, for example, on the neck, it has created a Starch Pin. That's very good. If you notice, it didn't do much change to the mesh. It's after that you add an Advanced Pin, for example, just over here, that it has taken effect. So it makes a lot of sense from now on that if you know exactly how you want to animate, of course there is trial and error, is to put first your Starch Pin, then the Advanced Pin. The difference sometimes can be minor, but it can really affect how you are distorting. So for me, I've taken the habit to add my Starch Pins, of course when I know what I'm doing, then add my Advanced Pins and the Bend Pin and start animating. I hope this was useful. I will see you in the next lecture with another pin. We are back to our alien, and I want to show you how to work with the overlap tool. I have put some pins here on his head, his hands, and his feet. If I take his hand, I don't know which one it is, the right hand, and then I move it towards the body, you notice it's coming behind the body. Very interesting. And I take the other hand and move it towards the body, it comes in front of the body. Guys, I only put the pins, I did not do anything else. So why one hand is coming on the back and the other hand is coming in front? This is because After Effects have taken a PNG image, flat pixels on the same plane. There is no 3D here, something in front, something in the back. It's a PNG image. And I studied all the pixels and decided, okay, these pixels should come in front and these pixels should come in the back. Just by having one hand in the back and one hand in front is truly a very good job already. Yeah, I like After Effects, that's obvious. So now the guys decided, okay, let's study these pixels, let's put them this one behind and this one in front. But maybe this is not exactly what you want. You want, for example, both hands to come in front. How do you change that? I'm going to do like this. I'm going to bring this one over here so it's in the back, okay? Then go to the Puppet Overlap Pin tool. Now let's say it shows me the mesh. You cannot put it outside the mesh. You cannot decide to start putting the pin over here for the overlap. You have to put it inside the mesh. I will click and put it inside the mesh. You notice the color is black and you have in front and extend. Actually, it should be 50%. That's the default the first time you use it. And I think here 100, something like this. In front 50%, it means that this overlap tool will take everything that is highlighted here, that's the white one, and put it in front at 50%. Not much. It's actually the default. And then the extend is 100. The overlap tool is the only one that you can move. You notice I'm moving the overlap here. So I'm making sure that it's covering. And it has different colors. If the pin itself is at 50%, these gray ones are not at 50%. You can see it from over here. They are a bit less. So actually what you do here, you say, okay, not 50%, but 100%. And then you can extend it more. Notice when you extend, it will grow the influence. Here you are. Okay, so now over here it's looking pretty cool, right guys? Okay, we go up a bit. Maybe that's the best. So all this white area now here, all these white triangles, because they're white, it means they are positive and they are in front, and in our case is plus 100%. If I go back to the Advanced Pin tool, now I can click on it and notice now this hand is in front, and pretty cool guys, right? I will undo that and just put it over here. Now let's take this foot. If you click and take it towards the other foot, it's coming in front. Maybe that's not what you want. You want it to go towards the back. Well, you have two choices. Well, you can take the first foot and make it in front, or take this one and make it towards the back. That's what I'm gonna do. I will take the puppet overlap pin, just put it on the mesh. Remember guys, you can see the mesh here with the line. I will click just over here. Now it's white, which means it's positive. Let's make it negative, minus 100%. You notice the color has changed to black. So in front, or towards the front, or positive in front is white, and negative in front is black. And maybe I will move it a bit for the extend. Here you are. Okay, I'm gonna go back. Yep, I think that's cool. And now it is minus 100% all the black area. The gray area here is not minus 100, maybe it's less, but it's still negative, it's not white. I will go back to the Advanced Pin tool. I will go back to the pin, and notice the foot that was in front is now in the back. So this is a fantastic way to put pixels in front or in the back of other pixels and really get your animation the way you would like. Within the timeline, the overlap tool will not appear because it's a state tool. You cannot change it, you cannot do anything with it. Just doesn't appear. It's only when you select it over here, then you will start seeing the pins and you start working with them. Let's see exactly how we can animate. Let's try to animate his leg here and a bit of his head. I won't go too far because it gets boring for you to look at me, moving some keyframes around. I will zoom in over here. I'm not gonna use the position pin. I'm gonna use just the advanced pin and maybe the bend pin. But now, what is the decision? Shall I put the starch pin in the beginning to create some bones or not? Well, actually, what I'm gonna do is to come to the puppet advanced pin, put a pin just over here. And of course, it's gonna move all the way, so I'm gonna put another pin here. So now, if I move the leg, here you are, it's moving very nicely. I can also rotate it. Let's start from here. Let's go to half a second, something like this, and then move the pin over here. Okay, and then rotate it. Simple like this. Let's rotate more. So now we have a very simple animation of this guy lifting his foot. Not bad at all. I could, for example, put another pin over here. The way I'm gonna do it is to put it just here, okay, and to rotate it. Just like this, and to lift it a bit up. I'll come back to the beginning. Of course, it's distorted. I'm gonna take the pin and put it down and just rotate it. Okay, that's one way to do it. I'm gonna take it a bit more down. Okay, so we have very nice animation now. The guy lifts. So let's come to the timeline here. And I will go full screen. I didn't know I wasn't. And I will select the keyframes over here and move them to almost half a second, something like this. Then collect all the keyframes, Ctrl-C to copy them, come back over here and paste them again. So now I have a kind of same animation. So the guy is moving. Of course, you can start looping out all these keyframes. That won't be a problem. Or you can just select all of them again, Ctrl-C, come over here and duplicate them the way you would like. Okay, so we have this animation now, right? So we notice that he's moving too much over here. So let's put an advanced pin. Now, if you play, he's moving only his foot. Not bad. Let's see it all together, fit to 100%. And the guy is animating his foot. Of course, feel free to do more animation for the other feet. Now I'm gonna add here on the head. And then when he comes in the beginning, he lifts his foot. I'm gonna turn this head just a bit. Okay, just a bit like this. Then the next one, maybe I'll take the head back. Okay, like this. Yep. Then the next keyframe over here, I'm gonna take it back here. Now I have a cycle. Now I'm go to the other one, and I have a kind of a cycle here. And Control C, Control V. That will do. Let's play it. Yep, nice. Cool, guys. So this is a way to animate if you like, and you can go ahead, do all kind of animations with the pins. Be careful how you animate, how you bend, and so on. Please, as a challenge, you can do the other feet. For example, make the guy dance. You don't have to make him walk. Okay, you can just make him dance. It should be interesting to make him dance with the other foot in the opposite direction, meaning when this one is up, this one is down, and vice versa. And you have the guy, jumping back and forth on the two front feet. And don't forget to move the head. Thank you very much for listening. I will see you in the next lecture.